Welcome back to Next Gen Investing. It's time for Under 30. Today we are talking Joby Aviation, which is down 2% after a Morgan Stanley downgrade. So joining me is George Tsilis and, of course, Kevin Green here to bring us some hopeful insight on a space that aerospace right now, I think, is facing some massive supply chain risk if we see the full extent of this tariff news come to fruition. Georgia, I'm curious your thoughts here.
Yeah, I think that's essentially what's going on with Joby. And I think we've talked about Archer on this segment, which is a competitor of Joby in the electric vehicle takeoff and landing technologies, basically like electric helicopters for passenger flight in major urban centers and airports. It's a novel idea. This is a company that's also, along with Archer, facing certification delays from the FAA, but nonetheless, this is a company that's expected to start actually carrying passengers by the end of this year, beginning of next year, contingent upon them getting the certification from the FAA. So right now, they're actually in the testing and planning phases of that. They did pass the certification planning phase of their business, and so they're just waiting for FAA approval. But one of the things about the business there's a few things, a couple things. One, you have to consider the revenue, which is really non-existent for Joby at the moment. And the other thing is, and even on top of that, the challenges from supply chains. And so Morgan Stanley actually downgraded the stock to an equal weight from overweight. They moved their price target to $7 from 10. And they actually cited these macro-centric risks, which include, of course, potential slower growth, but also supply chains, which are already impacting major, airline companies or airline manufacturing companies like Spirit Aerosystems and even Boeing.
It's kind of interesting, George, when you're kind of looking at it, who would have thought that it would be supply chain more than regulatory risk for this company? But when do you think, or do they have like a timeline when it comes to really doing this on a bigger scale? I know that they have some contracts with the government as well as the military, but when do we actually see the commercialization really hitting the market for this name?
Well, right now, if you just look at what they've done, they're already like in what they call phase 4. The previous phase 3 was essentially the certification plan phase. They passed that. They're now in the testing and analysis phase with the FAA. So they're getting closer toward the end stage for them to finally be certified for passenger travel. I think if you look at the stock itself, obviously it's challenged because of what's happening in the market. But there are also, again, some financial challenges. I mean, first off, because they're not generating much revenue of any. They do have some contracts and licensing agreements. They also have big backers in terms of investors, including Toyota Motor Company. So this is a big deal for their business. But you also have to offset the financial aspects of net losses. I mean, you're dealing with a company that's essentially close to $5 billion in market cap equity. They do essentially have about $600 million in losses that need to be financed. But they have about $980 million in cash on the balance sheet. So they have at least a 1.5-year runway at the current burn rate. And they, like I said, they are expecting by the end of this year, perhaps the beginning of next year, to start to be certified for passenger travel. So we're at an inflection point in the business. The FAA may provide some accelerated, certification for the testing of the business. But at the same time, they're facing the other supply chain challenges, which are going to be a little bit more cumbersome for the business, particularly if they're importing, electric components and motors and such from places like China, which we know are in the headlines right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And a name that, unfortunately, like you said, not exactly in a point of financial strength going into this volatility. We appreciate it, George, for the breakdown on Joby.